Today, crypto prices recover after a rough weekend. Wikipedia ends crypto donations because of environmental concerns. And some of the biggest names in Bitcoin draft a letter to the EPA defending crypto mining. We talked to one of the authors. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Digital currencies are on the rebound to start the week. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin traded around $38,000, off its weekend lows of $37,000. Ether recaptured $2,800 after falling over the weekend, while Solana dipped to $87. Now for the top stories. First, Crypto.com is slashing rewards given to holders of its prepaid Visa cards. The company capped cashback rewards for lower-tier cards and announced that it would phase out staking rewards in about 6 months. Crypto.com's Kronos token plummeted as much as 17% as users expressed their frustration with the change. Next, the company that runs Wikipedia will stop accepting crypto donations. The proposal to end crypto acceptance was drafted by Wikipedia contributor Molly White, and of the 400 members that voted, 71% approved it. Now, White said that accepting crypto was against Wikipedia's philosophy because they were, quote, inherently predatory. Finally, last week we told you about a letter drafted by Democratic lawmakers asking the EPA to investigate crypto mining. Well, this week, some of the biggest names in Bitcoin just responded. Jack Dorsey, Michael Saylor, Fidelity, and others co-authored a letter to the EPA saying that lawmakers misplaced the blame for crypto's energy use. Now, the authors of the letter claim that crypto mines, well, they're no different than data centers from the likes of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. Instead, they say the focus should be on power plants. I spoke to one of the authors of that rebuttal, Darin Feinstein. He's the co-founder of Crypto Mine Core Scientific. Here's what he told me about why he helped draft that letter. So Darin, let's dig in. For people who aren't really familiar with the arguments being made by House Democrats, let's start with that, and then we'll talk about the points that they made that you think are wrong.
Yeah, so the arguments, and I'll go through them, Mackenzie, one by one. The first one that I think is the most glaring problem is they conflate two different industries. The letter conflates data centers and power generation or energy generation or electricity generation companies. The data center company, the data center industry is much different than the power generation industry. And so in the letter, you see a lot of talk about how much Bitcoin mining data centers are contributing to pollution and how much carbon is being emitted from the Bitcoin mining data centers and ecological or environmental pollutants that are put out by Bitcoin mining data centers. And so I think the most important thing to explain to people, and we would hope the representatives will do the work to learn about what a data center is. A data center is simply a building that's connected to the electrical grid. So it takes electricity upstream from wherever that electricity is turned into electricity from energy. So a data center pulls that electricity into its building to power servers. The next item that's in the letter also to address is they address e-waste. And what e-waste is when the ASIC computers, so the Bitcoin miners, when they reach their lifespan, they would get discarded into, according to this letter, a landfill. And so what the letter said was that 30,700 tons of ASICs are discarded every year into landfills, which is a massive number. That is a lot of e-waste. And so if you believe that number, that's a concerning metric, that how many of these computers get discarded every year. There's a lot of problems with that figure, and it's been historically debunked over and over again.
And the concern essentially is twofold, right? That this research says that the lifespan of the gear itself is roughly around 1.3 years, and that all gear is automatically discarded, but there is a pretty substantial resale market. So those were the two things you felt were skewing the data. That's what I gleaned from the letter.
100%, Mackenzie. You're 100% right. Yes. So the two metrics were the lifespan of the equipment, which they listed at 1.3 years. And the second one is where they're being discarded. The lifespan has been thoroughly debunked. The S9s, which are the last generation before the current generation of equipment. Currently, Bitcoin miners are using S19s and similar equipment. The S9s, which about 3 or 4 months ago were estimated to be roughly 40% of the network. So the S9s are a very critical piece of equipment that have been used by Bitcoin miners. Those were created and sold starting in 2016. So the S9s are going on year 6.
And, Darin, I want to move on to another point. So you've been in the Bitcoin mining business for a while. You co-founded one of the largest publicly traded mining companies in the U.S. today. And stepping back from, what lawmakers might or might not have gotten right, just how worried are you that there may be some movement here from the EPA?
I'm not concerned. I think that the facts stand for themselves. Once anybody would do any kind of due diligence on what is actually created in terms of waste or emissions from these facilities, as long as they were unbiased, they would see what the facts are. The fortunate part of this industry is that the facts are on our side, not just on emissions or e-waste, but on energy use and also the utilization of our technology to help stabilize the electrical grids across America, because the Bitcoin miners, because we are flexible load, which means that we can toggle them on and off in case of emergency. If there's any kind of electrical event, if there's a weather event that causes an emergency event on the electrical circuits or on the transmission lines, the Bitcoin miners can power down and provide that energy back to the grid with no consequence. Yeah. Traditional data centers can't do that. Traditional data centers run air traffic control and traffic lights and hospital databases. You don't want to turn them off, and they're created to that extent to not turn off. Whereas if there's any kind of emergency or controlled load event, the data centers that are running Bitcoin miners will turn off right away, and we're contractually obligated, Core Scientific and a number of the publicly traded and larger operators in America, we're contractually obligated to turn off right away if there's any kind of grid stress.
Before we go, the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting was this past weekend, and Warren Buffett once again said that he is not a fan of Bitcoin. Take a listen.
If you told me you owned all of the Bitcoin in the world and you offered it to me for $25, I wouldn't take it, because what would I do with it? I have to sell it back to you one way or another. I mean, maybe I have the same people, but it isn't going to do anything.
That's all for today, but we'll be back again tomorrow. See you then.